So what are forecasts? According to our text, a forecast is a statement about the future value of a variable of interest. The way I like to see it is that a forecast is really nothing more than making a bet today about what might happen in the near future. And if you make a smart bet, your business can reduce costs, increase revenue, and be more profitable. But if you make a bad bet, you can be in a lot of trouble. Before we go any further, I want to take a look at the following two different forecasting statements. In the first statement, it says, yesterday and today were cloudy, so I bet $20 that tomorrow will be cloudy too. This type of forecasting is called a time series forecast. And the reason why it's called a time series forecast is because we're looking at data from the past to make an educated guess about the future. In the second statement, it says, I bet $20 that it is raining because Bobby is holding an umbrella. This type of forecast is not based upon time, but based upon another variable. In this case, Bobby is holding an umbrella. Basically, this bet is made because every time I see Bobby holding an umbrella, I see that it has been raining. And so even if I don't know that it's raining, and I see Bobby holding an umbrella, I can make a reasonable assumption and forecast and confidently bet that it is raining outside. Okay, so as a quick recap on the two statements that we looked at that represent two different types of quantitative forecasts. In the first statement, we made a bet that tomorrow will be cloudy based upon today's and yesterday's weather forecast. This represents a time series. Here, it's important to know that you're making an assumption that the future would be just like the past. And so inherently, there's a risk involved. And so you can never be 100% certain that your forecast will be accurate. In the second statement, you made an association between Bobby holding an umbrella and the fact that it's raining outside. In this model, you're looking at an explanatory variable to predict the future. Every time you see X, you notice that Y happens. Today, you see X. There is a good chance that because you see X, it is likely that Y is there as well. Now we will take a look at 4 features that are common to forecasting methods. The first feature is that forecasts are a part of a causal system, which means that there's a cause and effect relationship. In the time series, we said that there was a relationship between time and weather. In the associated model, we said that there's a relationship between one variable, Bobby holding an umbrella, and it raining outside. In this case, Bobby holding an umbrella is the independent variable, and the fact that it could be raining outside being the dependent variable. The next thing we need to be aware of is that forecasts are not perfect. Just because your forecast predicts something to happen, it does not mean that it will happen 100% of the time. There's always a probability that it will not happen. And so therefore, there is always risk involved. The next common feature is that when you forecast for groups, the items tend to be more accurate than when you forecast for individuals, because with groups, each individual item tends to cancel each other out. The final feature common to all forecasts is what we refer to as the time horizon. And they come in 3 flavors. They come in the short range, which is typically less than 3 months. Then we have the medium range, which is typically between 3 months and a year. And finally, we have the long range, which is anything greater than a year. So forecasting for short range is great for forecasting for such things as inventory replenishments. For medium range forecasts, they're great for product planning. And finally, long range forecasts are great for actually planning different types of plants. Just remember here that the longer the time horizon, the more risky and uncertain your forecast becomes. Because this information is in our textbooks, I'm not going to spend too much time, but I do want to quickly go through and touch on the 6 steps necessary to make your forecast. The first step that you should do is always to determine the purpose. Why are you doing the forecast? This is actually really important because, as we'll be learning later, there is a very close relationship between the accuracy and the responsiveness of your forecasts. Secondly, we want to establish the time horizon. Like we just talked about in the previous slide, depending on the time horizons, you're going to have different needs, and different needs require different time horizons. Thirdly, you want to select the forecasting technique. Are you going to be using the time series or the associative model? Fourthly, you want to gather and then analyze the data that you will be using as your forecast input. If you pick the wrong data, you will get the wrong output, and therefore your forecast will be incorrect. Fifthly, you just have to do it. Finally, you want to analyze and monitor your forecast. Does your forecast actually meet the needs that you established in step 1? If not, you may need to go back and either gather new information, or you might even need to select a new, different technique. But it is always important to monitor and analyze your forecasting output. And with that, let's start looking at different forecasting techniques.